Have another shipfold week here of information for you. Every time you think that this can quiet down, no, we have more information, including a mine sighting. We're going to break this all down for you. We're going to give you the latest news as of today, May 31st. We're going to discuss the advisories that are out, and then we'll do the week in recap. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. So I want to take you over to marine traffic and show you the current situation out there. Now, there's a couple of things to be warned about with marine traffic right now. So first off, we have superimposed the area where the Iranians have supposedly laid mines. That area in red there in the center of your screen, this is where the normal traffic separation scheme is. You can see those yellow lanes right there. But Iran has mined that area, supposedly, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, and have set up their new lanes. These are lanes that go in their territorial waters. Let's take a look over here in the central part of the UAE. There is a large cluster of ships here in the mountains of the UAE. They are not there, just to be clear. This is what we refer to as spoofing. These ships have not built up speed and Bo and Luke duked it across the creek into the area above the mountains of the UAE. This is pure spoofing. What the AIS is doing is transmitting its position, but it's being morphed and sent into different areas. So this is a big problem in that area. We also have several interesting ships that are squawking in this area. So for example, I give you the IRGC toll collector. Now, this ship just appeared. There's no information attached to this ship at all. It's showing as an Iranian vessel, a dredge of all things. I don't think this vessel is out there collecting tolls in any ways. I think this is just the Iranians maybe having a little fun in the area. Not to be outdone, we have this vessel, the Jersey Devil 404. It's identified as a U.S. flag tanker. Now, I know every U.S. tanker there is, and there is no Jersey Devil 404. It's listed as being registered in the United States, 189 meters in length. This ship does not exist. No ownership, no nothing. I actually think that this is probably a drone of some type that has turned on an AIS just to cause some information. The Column Systems tanker, U.S. flag, again, does not exist. So AIS tracking of ships right now is not there. So I'm not exactly sure what is happening in regards, but you're going to have to take any information you see on AIS with a lot of, a grain of salt. Let's put it that way. So let's talk about the big stories as we hit May 31st here. So GCAP has this story. The Oman Maritime Security Center on Saturday issued a navigation warning after a floating object suspected to be a naval mine was sighted within Omani territorial waters. This is the specific alert that was issued to them due to the sighting of a floating object suspected to be a floating mine west of the inshore traffic zone in the Strait of Hormuz within Omani territorial waters. The Maritime Security Center urges all seafarers, fishermen, and vessels to exercise the utmost caution while navigating in the area. All maritime users are advised to keep a safe distance from any suspicious objects and report them immediately to the relevant authorities. So this video over on Twitter shows the suspected mine. You'll see it kind of popping up here just below the surface. This looks a lot like an Iranian mine. Hard to tell. You can see some growth on the mine, but not a lot, which indicates the mine probably has not been in the water too long. Moored mines, these are kind of the classic ball with horn mines. These are contact mines. You have to physically touch the mine to trigger it. They're usually anchored below the water. The problem you do have is that these mines will break their tethers. They will float loose and come out. So we don't know if that's a floating mine, if the mine has popped up, floating just below the surface there, or if it's an anchored mine at the bottom. Regardless, it's a problem. If there are mines in the water, and this is the first actual indication we do have mines in the water, that creates difficulties for ships transiting through the area. We have this story from Mike Schuller over at GCAP. U.S. forces disable a commercial vessel showing Iran blockade still active despite peace talks. So this is the CENTCOM press release on this. U.S. forces operating in the Gulf of Oman forced blockade measures by disabling a Gambia-flagged maritime vessel attempting to sail through an Iranian port on May 29th. CENTCOM forces observed motor vessel Leon Star. It's not Leon Star. It's one word, Leon Star. CENTCOM, if you're going to issue these releases, put the right name and also put the IMO number so you know who we're talking about. Names change, names are wrong all the time. IMO numbers stay the same. Transiting international waters toward an Iranian port on the Gulf of Oman issued more than 20 warnings. A U.S. aircraft disabled the vessel by firing a Hellfire missile into the ship's engine room after Leon Star's crew failed to comply. The ship is no longer transiting to Iran. U.S. forces have disabled 5 commercial vessels and redirected 116 to fully enforce the blockade as a ceasefire with Iran remains in effect. So 5 vessels. This vessel, Leon Star, is one of them. Tuska, the container ship that the U.S. fired upon from the USS Spruance, has been turned over to the Pakistanis. And then the 3 tankers, one was strafed by an F-18 and 2 others were hit by Hellfire missiles fired from F-18s off the port of Jask. I do think that there may be more ships hit than 5 because we had imagery from Jask showing a few vessels emitting smoke and fire and leaking. So we're not exactly sure if that is an accurate number. We also have a new advisory issued by the Joint Maritime Information Center. This one is out of the U.S. Navy Central Command and NCAGS. This is the Navy Cooperation and Guidance for Shipping. Specifically, what they're identifying is a couple of key issues here. On the right, blockade of Iran ports remain in effect. A restricted area exists due to military blockade operations in the Arabian Gulf, Gulf of Oman, Northern Arabian Sea, and Strait of Hormuz. What's interesting is this part here. A military blockade of Iran ports remain in effect. Ships aiding vessels violating the blockade by conducting ship-to-ship transfers with them are also in violation of blockade. Enforcement actions, including disabling and destructive fires upon vessels who do not demonstrate immediate compliance with blockading forces. It goes on here with the action. Vessels subject to blockade enforcement should continue compliance with direction from blockading forces. Failure to immediately comply may result in rapid escalation or disabling or destructive fire, kind of what we just saw with Leon Star. The issue with the ship-to-ship transfers is really important. We know that Iran is moving ships from the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz out into the Gulf of Oman, but they can't get past the U.S. blockade, as we'll talk about here. That means that they may be doing ship-to-ship transfers, coming skin-to-skin with another ship, pumping oil and cargo into them, and then those ships are leaving. Remember, the U.S. is permitting vessels to leave this area, only stopping ships that are stopping in Iranian ports. We then have our normal advisory out from JITMIC. This one dates back to 28 May. Again, they're not doing them on a fairly consistent basis now. What's interesting in this report is their changing of threat levels. While the Strait of Hormuz remains critical, the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Gulf have been downgraded down to severe. The Somali coast, Somali basin remains substantial due to piracy, and then all other areas in the region are listed as moderate. The number of transits for 27 May was identified as 3, those for 26 May as 7. And you can see those breakdowns here in the charts. Now, again, what JITMIC is tracking is those vessels using AIS. They are broadcasting. What they're not tracking are the dark vessels, or at least not publishing the data for that. You can see how we had that huge, massive dip here after February 28th. Very few vessels. We then had a big uptick here in the middle of April, and then a downward turn, and then more ships coming out in May. So a couple other reports that are out there. The United Against a Nuclear Iran have been tracking vessels. They have identified 69 laden Iranian tankers inside the Persian Gulf, primarily crude, but there are some petroleum carriers and LPG. Most of them are inside the Persian Gulf around Karg Island. There are some around Bandar Abbas, about 12. And then another large concentration of 14 right near the Iranian-Pakistan border. That is where the U.S. blockade is. UANI also tracks Iranian tankers globally. Since the conflict, at least 32 Iranian-flagged tankers have reached Southeast Asia. Many of them are bound for what's called the Eastern Outer Port Limits anchorage off Johor, Malaysia. This is the eastern coast of Malaysia, a well-known ship-to-ship transfer spot. Meanwhile, at least 35 Iran-flagged tankers reporting empty have begun attempts to return to Iran. From February 28th, the start of the conflict, to today, UANI has recorded 69 ship-to-ship transfers of Iranian crude oil and 5 transfers of liquefied petroleum gas. UANI's also identified Iranian flagships around the world. You can see a lot clustered here in and around that anchorage off the east coast of Malaysia. There's also some right here off the coast of Sri Lanka. Some of the Iranian ships we suspect have been running along the coastline here within the territorial waters of India, Pakistan, and into Iranian territorial waters. The United States is not going to violate India and Pakistan territorial waters. This is the large anchorage of vessels located off Karachi in Pakistan. What the UANI is showing in that blog report is really that the Iranians are having a difficult time moving their oil and cargo on the high seas due to sanctions and the U.S. blockade. Now, under the U.S. blockade, humanitarian aid can get in and out of Iran. We haven't heard a lot of reports about what is getting in and out, but that's a definite issue. And just remember, there are other ways for cargo to get into Iran. They have the Caspian Sea to the north, which allows them to trade directly with Russia and several of the Central Asian states. There are overland routes through Afghanistan, Pakistan, in which they can move goods. So there are other ways to move, but the vast majority of their goods move by sea, and this is hurting Iran. So that gives you a snapshot for what's happening as of May 31st in the Persian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz, and Gulf of Oman. Remember, we're talking about shipping here on this channel, so that's what we tend to focus on the maritime dimensions of this struggle. Let's take a look at the past week in review. So on May 24th, a LNG tanker exits Hormuz for India for the first time since war began. Now, this is a UAE vessel, an ADNOC vessel that headed out. Again, what we're seeing is India is working to try to get more cargo sent over to them. The UAE, Iran are being able to push some vessels through the strait. Now, we don't know how this vessel went through. Did it use the Iranian lanes? Did it come down through the Omani lanes south of the blocked passage? We just kind of don't know at this point. Supertanker with Iraqi crude exits Persian Gulf as talks continue. This is the Eagle Verona, 2 million barrels of oil heading over to Ningbo in China. Again, this vessel did use the Iranian lanes. Iran has given Iraq permission to sail ships through, but we're not seeing large numbers come through. But again, an indication that Iran has some control over passages through the Strait of Hormuz. 26 May, U.S. and Iran clash near Hormuz, even as both talk progress. So the idea of a ceasefire is a really hard one to swallow because while the U.S. is not directly bombing targets throughout Iran, they have been hitting targets in Iran, particularly along the coast. And on May 26th, that's what we saw. We saw strikes along coastal targets and along the periphery of the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not exactly sure how the U.S. sells the idea of a ceasefire being in place when they are exchanging weapon fire. I understand why it's being done. This is to circumvent the vote in Congress over the War Powers Act. However, this is part of Epic Fury. I think this is just Congress not exercising their responsibilities in forcing a vote on war powers. We have this report from the UK MTO of a tanker reporting an explosion off Oman. This is the Olympic Life, a Marshall Islands flag vessel. They reported an explosion off the port side. Now, there were no injuries on board, but there is a spill. We believe the spill is bunker fuel, not cargo fuel. And so that is being examined at this time. CMA CGM warns Middle East crisis still reshaping global trade. Well, thank you, CMA CGM, for the Captain Obvious report of this week. No shit. I mean, I'm sorry. It's like I don't really need the obvious here, but I think what they're trying to do is put out there that, listen, this is reshaping global trade, so expect for things to be more expensive to ship. They're in the position, the container liners, of having to justify surcharges. The Federal Maritime Commission in the United States and similar organizations around the world in the EU and Asia are going to be questioning the container liners and their additional charges and surcharges. Because what we saw was that was kind of abused a bit during the COVID crisis and the supply chain crisis. So not everyone is going to just blindly start paying money. There's going to be some pushback against that. The Royal Navy deploys mine hunting mothership for potential Hormuz mission. So this is the RFA Line Bay. First off, Royal Fleet Auxiliary. This is kind of the British version of the Military Sea Lift Command, or Military Sea Lift Command is the RFA version in the United States. It's hard to tell, a little bit of chicken and egg about which one came first. The RFA is a fantastic organization. You read about their history in World War II and, more importantly, like the Falklands War. And these are some hard-charging merchant mariners. They're civilian merchant mariners in the employ of the British government. And Line Bay is a class of landing ship dock auxiliary, LSDAs. And I love these ships. I think these are fantastic ships. They're kind of a jack of all trade. But they're loading up with drones and other mine hunting vessels and equipment so that they can help lead this multinational force that is appearing off the Strait of Hormuz. We've got the Charles de Gaulle battle group down in the Gulf of Oman. We've got the HMS Dragon from the Royal Navy out there. And now here comes Line Bay. U.S. military denies reports restart of U.S. naval escorts in the Strait of Hormuz. So there was an allegation that the U.S. had restarted escorting. They're not. Although I will say this, there are reports that the U.S. is providing overhead aerial support for vessels running through the southern Oman section of the Strait of Hormuz. We believe helicopters and aircraft are being used. Remember, the 82nd Airborne Division of the United States Army's 18th Airborne Corps is on the ground in the UAE. They have the AH-64 Apache longbows with their radars. They are providing that aerial guidance over these ships. So you don't have Arleigh Burke-class destroyers running through the strait, but you do have helicopters and jet aircraft providing some surveillance of ships heading through the strait. In particularly, what they're trying to do is provide protection against unmanned aerial and surface drones and, of course, cruise and guided missiles and ballistic missiles, because, as you'll see, the Iranians have started using them against ships. Iran says new U.S. strikes violate ceasefire. Well, yeah, I could also say that the Iranians attacking shipping kind of violates ceasefire. What both sides have agreed to is stop the full-fledged attacks against each other, but what we're seeing is strikes. We saw a ballistic missile strike by Iran against Kuwait. We saw the UAE launch strikes against the Iranians. I mean, the idea of a ceasefire here is very comical. Canada to supply Germany with LNG from $7.3 billion export project. Now, kind of outside the Strait of Hormuz, but I think a very interesting one, because the Canadians from British Columbia are going to be exporting liquefied natural gas to Germany. That's a far haul. I mean, you're talking about coming from the Pacific coast of Canada to Germany. That means through the Panama Canal, which is going to put big pressure on the Panama Canal. Something we haven't talked about enough yet is the pressure the Panama Canal is feeling right now from the number of ships going through. Hopefully we don't have an El Nino, I think it's El Nino, impact where we have low water in the canal like we had 2 years ago in 2024. South Korea says attack on ship in Strait of Hormuz likely involved an Iranian missile. This is the Namu. This is a vessel that was struck by the Iranians, very similar to what we saw with the CMA CGM San Antonio. I did that in the Week 11 report where we looked at the damage to that ship. Namu from HMM was probably hit by a missile. And these are direct attacks, both against Namu and against CMA CGM San Antonio. Missile threats are something that's a whole new level. If the Iranians are launching cruise or ballistic missile attacks, that has big potential for escalation in the area. ADNOC exports another LNG shipment through Hormuz to India. So another tanker, liquefied natural gas tanker from the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, went through the Strait of Hormuz, and we're seeing more of that. This is really key. Abu Dhabi, the UAE, is trying to get oil and liquefied natural gas out, so is Qatar. So if they can start resuming these passages, this is good news for those countries in the Middle East. But just remember, this is a fraction of what was normally heading out. So we have this story. Fed official says global energy demand may need to fall if Hormuz stays shut. I may have been a little bit early on my Captain Obvious award here for the week. I don't think the world is going to get by on less oil and gas if Hormuz stays shut. I think there's going to be a fight for what is out there. I don't think people will consciously sit there and say, well, I'm going to stop driving as much because of the Strait of Hormuz. No, what's going to happen is developed countries, richer countries, are going to be able to get gas and oil, and underdeveloped, poorer countries will not. And we're already seeing that with rationing in countries where that happens. Everybody in Europe, the United States, kind of the developed world, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, they're all watching this and may not be feeling the effects as much as the underdeveloped countries are around the world. And that's going to be a problem. It's going to be a question of haves and have-nots. And that's what happens when resources get choked. SPR oil heads to California for first time amid Iran war disruption. So a lot of talk about strategic petroleum reserves. The country that is tapping into their SPR in huge amount is Japan. Japan is depleting its SPR very quickly. The U.S. is tapping into its SPR, but it's a pretty big SPR. China's is ridiculously huge. I mean, it's just massive, something like in the range of 1.4 billion barrels. And China really hasn't tapped too much into it. The U.S. is. But this cargo out of the SPR heading to California is really the first one we've seen. And this is sending oil over into the refineries in California. Now, California has got a couple of issues going on at the same time here. One of the big ones is the reduction in refineries. 17% of California's refineries have shut down in the past 2 years. That means that its ability to produce gas, diesel, jet fuel is encumbered, and that's creating a huge problem. That has nothing to do with the Strait of Hormuz. That is California being California. Sorry, California, but I mean, it's what you do. Then we have this story. The Jones Act waiver reshapes U.S. oil trade as foreign tankers flood domestic routes. Now, if you're on social media, there are groups who are waiting, just absolutely fervently waiting for the Maritime Administration to issue their new reports on the Jones Act waiver. Matter of fact, I have a live feed over at Cato headquarters right now of them. Yep, that's them waiting for the next MARAD report to come out so they can put together an AI graphic and post it for everybody to see. The problem with this is as follows. I got to do a whole separate video on this because the Jones Act's a big topic and I don't want to get off track here. But what is happening is we've seen Jones Act tankers, which are U.S. flagged, U.S. owned, U.S. crewed, and U.S. built. They are at max capacity. They are moving as much fuel and oil around the United States as normal. But what's happening is there's a spike in demand for it. One of it is being generated by California because California has shut 17% of its refineries. They knew that was happening. Phillips, Valero, all the Marathon, all the big oil companies knew this was coming. And they're using Hormuz as kind of an answer here to get around this by shipping oil in. Now, what they were doing was getting refined product from Asia because that was cheaper. They can get refined product from South Korea, from Japan, and even from China if they wanted to. The problem is because of the decrease in oil imports out of Hormuz, those countries aren't either producing enough or they're curtailing their exports of those commodities. So we're moving them. What's not being reported here, which is really, really important right now, is while we're shuffling gas and oil around the United States, at the same time, we're exporting huge amounts out. While these Jones Act waiver ships are moving oil around, at the same time, foreign tankers are picking up oil, sometimes the same oil, picking it up and exporting it overseas and depleting U.S. gas stocks, which is a big issue that is emerging. The depletion of gas stocks in a lot of countries are going to be an issue. Again, I'll go more in depth in a follow-up video on this. Trump threatens Oman as Hormuz deal remains elusive. So Oman and Iran have a very interesting relationship. Oman is not really in the wheelhouse of the United States. And one of the things that we've been hearing about is Oman and Iran maybe brokering a deal to set up a Strait Commission of some kind to control the Persian Gulf Straits. That's not going to fly in many ways for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is there's no reason for it. It is an open passage under transit passage identified in the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. So the U.S. is stating this, but other countries have stated this too. It's not just the United States. U.S. sanctions Iran's Persian Gulf Strait Authority as Hormuz transit fight escalates. So this is the designated Persian Gulf Strait Authority. Iran has said that this area would come under their oversight, and this extends all the way out into the Gulf of Oman and into the Persian Gulf, from the coast of Oman and the United Arab Emirates up to the coast of Iran. The United States has now basically sanctioned this entity, meaning that if you do business with the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, the PGSA, again, the most heavily armed PGA out there is the PGSA. If you do business with the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, you'll be operating with a sanctioned entity, which means that if you want to do business in the United States, you're not going to be able to do it. So the idea here is make the PGSA radioactive so that no country will do business with it. It has issues associated with it, like all sanctions do, but it is definitely a targeted effort by the United States. We have this story. Report says Iran and U.S. reach outline ceasefire deal after latest attack. So coming into the weekend, like every weekend, we have some sort of agreement that's lingering in the process. This one sounded like it had a little bit more potential than others, but again, I don't believe it until I see it. There's a lot of issues associated with this, but we got the announcements from Iran and the United States about it, so we're waiting to see and hear. U.S. targets Iran shipping network with new sanctions. This is economic fury, a lot of targeting of the Iranian economic network. Again, if you're going to be trading in Iranian oil and goods, well, you're going to be on the receiving end of sanctions. So once you touch them, it's going to follow you. U.S. and Iran reach deal on extended ceasefire pending Trump approval. So again, we get to this point where we're like at the precipice of an agreement coming out of Pakistan, but still, as of May 31st, nothing in writing yet. So this week, Chevron CEO made the rounds on all the major news shows, and he talks about a very real risk still existing for vessels attacked in Hormuz. He came out and said a couple of things. Number one, that Chevron will not pay the toll for Iran at all, but he says that the risk for transiting this area is still very high. And I want to come back to the issue that it's rearing its head once again, and this has to do with war risk insurance. War risk insurance was a story week one. It is not a story anymore. All ships can get war risk insurance. They can go out to a broker and get it commercially. They don't need it from the U.S. government. They can get it. It's out there. If you want to pay for a transit of the Strait of Hormuz, you can. It's running between 1% to 5% depending on the ship. The ownership is a lot of variables in it. There is no meter you can go to find out what the war risk insurance is for the Strait of Hormuz. Some people have posted this, that there's, this is the level. It's like car insurance. All car insurance is different for every individual. It depends on your driving history, what you're insuring. There are all these factors, and then brokers have these formulas for it. But the key here is that the other element besides war risk insurance is security. And right now, ships don't feel like they have security, and they are not going to risk them. Shipping companies are risk adverse by definition. They are not going to take the chance. What war risk covers is damage to the ship, cargo, the crew. It doesn't cover future losses, which is the big problem, because if you lose a tanker and it's gone for 10 or 15 years of future business, they don't replace that. Trump claims breakthrough on Hormuz, but shipping question remains. Again, we're further teased. I mean, here it is. It's Friday afternoon, May 29th, and we're getting this idea that, hey, everything's going good. And guess what? Oil prices drop. I can't, it's Groundhog Day every Friday when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. I'm sorry. It just, until I see concrete evidence that they have an agreement in place, I'm not buying any of this. A quarter of big oil tankers trapped by Iran have escaped. So this story came out and everybody is like, wow, this is great. Tankers are coming out. This is fantastic. No, it's not. Let me be clear. No, this is not. Out of 109 deep draft tankers that are in the Persian Gulf, 29 have gotten out. 29. This is over 100 days. This is a huge, massive problem. The donut hole that exists in global oil out there is significant. What we're seeing is global oil reserves drop. I mean, just precipitously drop. Now, fortunately, we were at record highs before the conflict, but what we're seeing is that number is dropping, and everyone's feeling comfortable. I got to tell you once again, if tomorrow Bibi Netanyahu, President Trump, and the Ayatollah of Iran get together, kiss, hug, make up, do whatever they do, that's an image I apologize you're going to be stuck with for a few minutes. If they make it a deal, we are well behind the power curve. It is going to take a year to get everything reshuffled back into place and set back up, even if all the ships return back to the Persian Gulf, which I don't think is going to happen anyway, because nobody's going to trust Iran, the United States, and Israel not to do round 3 of these strikes in another couple of months or a year. World's top economic bodies warn Hormuz disruptions are draining oil inventories at record pace. And this is what we saw. We had a couple of groups here, the IEA, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization. Now, I know people are screaming at the screen right now. Sal, those are the 4 worst organizations on the planet. I got you. I understand what you're saying. Gotcha. But these are 4 that do capture data for us, and I think what they're saying is not wrong. These disruptions are draining oil inventories because we can see the numbers. I mean, all the data is showing this. We are heading into summer. Summer is peak energy consumption, and energy is disrupted. Oil, liquefied natural gas, liquefied petroleum gas, you name it. This is going to cause massive problems. Just because you're seeing a little bit dip down in the price of gas and diesel at the pumps right now, don't think this is over, because we're going to see long-term impacts of this across the board. Chinese COSCO tanker delivers asphalt to Connecticut under Jones Act waiver. So I was talking about that Jones Act waiver before. That Jones Act waiver had 2 specific provisions. One for the distribution of petroleum, oil or gas or diesel or jet fuel. Second, for fertilizer. What the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot is a Chinese COSCO tanker delivering asphalt from Louisiana to Connecticut? This has nothing to do with fertilizer or petroleum. This is, and again, this is the stupid, and I will say it, stupid way that these waivers are approved. Going through the Department of Defense/War, through Customs and Border Protection. I mean, this is asinine how they do this. There are some of these waivers, when you look at them, and they're idiotic. I mean, I don't know who gave these people permission to do this. You had ships that were loaded before the waiver went into effect that were allowed to do this. You have ships coming into port offloading fuel because they have excess to do it. You have ships moving cargo when there are U.S. suitable ships to do this. I don't have a problem with, if we have an emergent need, if California, if Florida, if Puerto Rico is running out of gas and we need to bring a ship into the Jones Act fleet to do this, then we do it. My problem is, this is oil traders making a shitload of money at the expense of the United States. A lot of places where these cargoes are going to, there's no shortages, and that oil and gas that's going there is then being loaded onto other ships to be exported overseas. We need to look at this a hell of a lot more closely, because the Trump administration says they're pro-American. They've got this huge shipbuilding issue. They want to return the United States back to its dominance. Yet at the same time, you've got Kevin Hassett and Steve Miller in the White House just loving this idea of ending the Jones Act. It is to say that the Trump administration is hypocritical on this is an understatement. Finally, 3 offshore platforms resume production at Iran's South Pars gas field. Now, this is interesting. Why is Iran restarting gas production at 3 offshore platforms? This is an indication of something, and I'm not exactly sure. Do they know that this agreement is coming? What are they seeing? This is a very interesting development. If we start seeing this energy production, do they have a means to get this energy out via different ways? Or are they doing those ship-to-ship transfers out in the Gulf of Oman or in the Persian Gulf? Or are they thinking that, again, we have